Thank you all for being here at the Green Mountain Book Fest today. I hope you've enjoyed the programming so far and continue to join us this afternoon and evening. My name is Erika Nichols-Frazer. I am a Vice President of the Green Mountain Book Fest Board. I'm also a poet and the editor of the Mountain Troubadour, which is the Poetry Society of Vermont's journal. I'm very pleased to welcome four wonderful poets with us today. I'm going to introduce them one at a time. They're each going to come up and read from their work, and then we'll have a conversation and time for questions afterwards. I would first like to introduce Alison Prine. Alison Prine's latest collection of poems, Loss and its Antonym, from Headmistress Press, won the 2023 Sappho's Prize in Poetry and came out in March. Her debut poetry collection, Steel, from Cider Press Review 2016, was named a finalist for the 2017 Vermont Book Award. Her poems have appeared in Plowshares, the Virginia Quarterly Review, 5 Points, Harvard Review, Prairie Schooner, and others. She lives and works in Burlington, Vermont. Awesome.
Thank you. Can you hear me in the back all right? Good. If I need to go, just do that. Thank you. It's so nice to be here. Thank you, and thank you. I'm so excited to hear, especially Toussaint, whose collection I have not yet gotten to hear from, and two of my favorites, Dean and Neil. So this is very exciting. Thank all of you who are here to hear our poems. Oh, talk louder. Maybe here, is this better? Okay. And I'm very excited to read from Loss and its Antonym. It is, like many of my poems, there's a strong undercurrent of grief and loss in this collection. My mother died in a car accident when I was a child, and that loss echoes through most of my writing, certainly in this collection, and I wanted to start with a poem about my mother called Stray. Peonies in bloom remind a woman of the best sex of her life. At night, I cut blossoms from all the neighbors' yards to honor my mother's infidelity. She holds a cigarette to her lips in the last photograph of her before the accident. Every week, I take one cigarette from the pack and smoke it in homage to all women who try so hard to be good until they can't. The path backward is made of quicksand and the heavy breath of horses. My mother's lover is back there, a mosaic of other people's stories. It is hard to distinguish each element. Locust blossoms falling from high branches, a full ashtray on the kitchen table, the smell of hard rain. Posture of a woman ready to step from one life to another. I was small when I got lost in a pasture, somewhere close to home yet unrecognizable. I try to calm this memory of horses and grasses as I survey the trail. I hear my parents fighting in the distance. The heart of a larger animal beats in my small chest. You can see my dead mother in the language of my hands. Here the grass is wet with spittlebugs and dew. A pasture with 3 horses, very early in the past. I wonder if she felt heard or only seen in a certain light. I wonder if she wanted in or wanted out. At the end of the backward path, there are sparks and shards and an accordion of steel. The shadow of the locust tree grieves. The surface of the lake breathes in the darkness, sheets on the empty bed. The the mourning dove resting on the pavement, sand on the backward path breathes, the bramble at the edge of the pasture breathes, the dog anxious at the door of the past, snow at the scene of the accident. The child I was, asleep in the wreckage, was breathing, but my mother, the other woman of a stranger, ceased. I was talking at a reading last week about the confusing symbolism of birds in my poetry that I have not yet figured out. But there are certain birds that appear in my poems that are singular birds that just I always remember. And this is a bird from my childhood that I have always held. And the poem is called Display. A blue peacock used to pace the steel perimeter of a 2-story cage in the skylighted courtyard of the South Hills Village Mall. I would stand and watch him, my mouth stained with sugared ice, as the silver escalators slid in their endless loop behind him. At 11 p.m., when the lights would finally dim, he fanned out his iridescent tail. Sometimes a bird can learn to love the darkness. If the next big thing I do is die, I know I will do it well. I've practiced since I was a girl. First, the click of the latch, then uncoiling in slow motion, sweeping my heavy colors high up through the open glass. So the question of what the antonym is to loss is the question that my poems are writing towards. And part of that is, I guess, I believe the antonym to loss is the deeper connection with the self. I'm going to read a couple of poems about that. Story of lies. It's hard to distinguish a metaphor from a lie. When I say I'm a mule turned out to pasture, I mean I was built for things I would not do. Stubborn. It was easier to lie before I learned to tell the truth. I longed for quiet places with open sky. I stood in my uniform in the shallows of Chautauqua Lake between the lunch and dinner shift, having my own blue thoughts. That was long before my vocabulary caught up with what I knew. I had as many good reasons to lie as bad ones. I was sure no one felt what I felt because I didn't. Then slowly, my body began to prove an equation. The total weight of air inside me equaled the words that took years to find my mouth. Coming out. I knew when the small plane I was riding touched down in the fog. I knew watching my stepmother's hands working the rock garden with my house. I didn't want the circle to close. I couldn't see myself in the dress so shaven. I knew because I loved to move through water, the way it yielded, the way it took me in its mouth. I knew, watching our hound mutt when he slipped out of the leash, the joy he had escaping. I just wanted to sleep in the wild strawberries with my chopped off hair. So I think, like many poets, I write poems to express what I have no way of expressing in any other way. And what better topic to feel deeply confused about than family. So I have a series in the middle of this book of 3 poems all called Family, and I wanted to read them to you today. Family. The kettle that whistles until it burns dry. The rusted faucet, the creak, when it rains, when it rises, the house unhinged, the years like an axe, a rope thrown into the water, the pull, the reeling, the place I lie down but can never sleep, rereading my face and yours. Family, too. The persistence of a sound after its source has stopped. My grandfather's pistol, chain on the rusted string set, rice in the salt shaker, linoleum beginning to crack, past, making racket. Unaged, like stained steel, like glass. There are ways all of us seem to be drowning. Straw breaks from the broom, the machines in the kitchen, washboard from my grandmother's farm, a hatchet and a stump, rake lying in the grass. When I asked how many was a million, he said, count the blades, the echo, reverberation, the hole it left. Family, 3. When each one went, none followed. Yet there is no severing. Our blood is thicker than Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Missouri, Kansas. No matter how far away, strands of our DNA lie in the soil of Allegheny County. Attempts to flee boomerang. Love needs no fondness, no face-to-face, no comprehension. One great-grandfather was a sailor. Great-great-grandmother stayed locked up for sadness. Water, 70% of the Earth's surface, more than half our bodies, we are all sailors. There's a single gesture we have in common, runs right down the bloodline. You might not perceive it until you see us from a distance. How we wave goodbye. And this is the poem that has the same title as the book, Loss and its Antonym. The opposite of losing you was watching you across the purple light of the dance floor in the local gay bar while the salt trucks dragged through the streets. We had our people back then. Janet all night at the pool table, Kevin by the men's room, a little drunk and smearing his mascara, and our song, an anthem for falling hard into each other's lives. That winter, we proved that being terrified doesn't prevent you from being happy. Even when the guy on Church Street threw a bottle at us and called us dykes on our way back to my place, where we ate ice cream out of the carton at 2 a.m., drunk on our bodies, and a snowstorm, and a conversation I can't remember, but we're still having it. I want to learn to write about the loves that haven't died. Yellow paperbacks with broken spines, the stillness of the lake from the fishing pier on winter mornings, people in this small city I sometimes recognize on the sidewalk a decade after our bar shut down. So my last poem I will read to you. I guess, another theme, of course, is aging in my writing, which is, has its losses and its gains and its compensation. And one of the great things is finally being able to make a little bit of sense of yourself. So, I ended the poem called, I Was Going to Build a Table, and then it wrote, I was going to sew my own shirts and grow strawberries. I was going to fix my machines when they were broken and leave the past behind me. The worst was over. But I didn't make things. Often I turned back. Now, I only want to know what I know. I read the definitions of the words I use most often. I study pictures of my face from when I was small, or from yesterday when I was annoyed, or 20 years ago when I was falling. I scrutinize the muscles of my cheeks, my brow. I want to know what I know. I don't want any more to make things. Only thoughts, those little seeds, their sweetness, their smallness, their might. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Alison. That was beautiful. Next, we're going to welcome Stephen Cramer. Stephen Cramer's first book of poems, Shiva's Drone, was selected for the National Poetry Series and published by the University of Illinois Press. Bone Music, his sixth, won the Louise Bogan Award. His ninth, The Disintegration Loops, was a finalist for the Vermont Book Award. His most recent is City Full of Fireworks and Blues, out from Shanti Arts. He is also the editor of Turn It Up, Music and Poetry from Jazz to Hip Hop. Cramer's work has appeared in journals such as the American Poetry Review, African American Review, the Yale Review, and Harvard Review. He teaches writing and literature at the University of Vermont and lives with his wife and teenager in Burlington. Glad to see him.
Thank you, Erika. I'm psyched to read with Neil, Alison, Toussaint, some of my favorite poets. So what a pleasure to be here. Thank you all for being here. So I want to read mostly from the new book, which is City Full of Fireworks and Blues. But I thought I would read one from the previous book just to illustrate the difference. I'm used to working with narratives, poems that tell stories, usually are a little bit longer, and the new book is not that. So I'll start with a narrative called Lipstick. The knot of 6 or 7 boys dashed back and forth against the strobe of sun through pines. Lipstick slurred across their chins and cheeks. I stumbled, a few delirious streaks cross-hatching my brow, across the stippled field of corn plowed under. We were far past the ditch of poison ivy and jewelweed, far from the closest house, where, an hour before, we had raided one of our mother's dresser tops for Lipstick's barrage of colors. Tropic sunrise, chilly burn, wine dark plum, their names as lavish as their hues. Then we ran off to the woods where we could rub those shades into the ends of our swords. Sticks, really. A slew of bent branches that we ripped from trees so that rot wouldn't sneak up on us mid-combat. Then it was every shirtless boy for himself, each waving his sword, some with the precision of a compass, others as wild and blind as a dervish. As we lunged towards each other, backed away, lunged and retreated, someone across the field might have mistaken our moves for an elaborate dance. Glide and stretch, turn and counter-turn. Until finally, the sky dizzy above us, we sprawled on the matted gold of grass, all of us splashed and branded with sham blood. After the heat of battle, we check ourselves, showing off with pride a swath of unscathed flesh. And I got you there, but yeah, I got you there. Then we'd help each other rub off the scars, smearing the lipstick into the various tones of our skin. Not one of us had yet received an errant blur of lipstick from another's mouth. Though we might have bragged differently, it'd be years until our first real kisses, and a few weeks after that before our first breakups. But here we were practicing for all the wounds we'd earn in the coming years. And here we were, all of us, so eager to go out and receive them. So I want to hold on to those days just before the onslaught of all those more lasting scars, when we lay spread-eagled next to each other, sweaty with our own hurt and healing, when we still couldn't tell wounds from kisses. All right, so these new poems are lyric poems, which are traditionally shorter, have to do with the emotion of the speaker. I had a friend when I used to work at the Museum of Modern Art in Manhattan. He was a painter, and he said that he knew that a painting was done when it made him feel really uncomfortable. By that metric, these poems are done. So this first one is called Relief. Every day, the atoms of my body are a little closer to being atoms of something that is not my body. Soon enough, they'll learn to sing from something other than my throat. So today, my prayer goes like this. Please, manifold tribe that makes me up, help me, while you can, to relieve my mouth of this song. Making way. After so many millions of years of not being, you'd think I'd be innately qualified, a professional in oblivion. But no, here I am again practicing how not to be. I close my eyes, try to feel my heart not as a heart, but as a stone, my tongue as a slug in the grass. I try to breathe as though each gulp of air were another root pressing its way through my chest, or an errant drop of water taken in again by the mother cloud. I used to think life was a blink, but really it's the opposite. The flash of eyes opening in the night, and the rest, not sleep, not dream, but dispersal, permeation, or better, penetration, as the earth spreads its soils, clenching and pulling to make way for your bones. Thunderous. The sound of a tree growing in fast forward, 100 years in 30 seconds, is a brief recital of rasp and squeak and groan. The sound of sheath after added sheath. It sounds like ice breaking up in the spring. It sounds like an avalanche. Try to hear the same of the entire woods, then of the continent, then of the world. Try to be deafened by life. I want to be able to hear in 30 seconds all the decades of my own heart beating, a rattle that grows louder then quickly subsides. I want to hear the sprouting of leaves in the spring, their crackling in the fall. All of it so thunderous, you can't distinguish the loss of any one thing. This one's called Choice. Tonight, it looks like the stars have had a few. Orion is skinny dipping in puddles, choreographing sweet dance moves with a street lamp. Actually, everything is clearly intoxicated, from the scent of rain laced with pine to the grass tilting beneath our feet. Let's face it, as of the most recent assessment, the day seems to have had a deficit of awesome. I mean, even if the task we've been given is to make a house out of a hurricane, to make walls with the whirlwind, to board by board create the floor we walk on, what choice do we have but to drive lightless all night and honk at all the mobs? It's far past time to walk a shadowed sidewalk that hasn't already memorized my stride, to speak with an eloquence that tends to slur into grunt and groan. Time to all night long hook elbows with awe. All right. This one is called Ledger. This body is a container for a certain number of breaths, a certain number of kisses. The horizon of your skin makes gravity a myth, releases every trace of music stored in my muscles. One day, all my thoughts will narrow to those I had in the womb, the world's vast nomenclature stripped down to basic human need. I know it's probably written on air, but somewhere there's a ledger that tells us how much of our breath we've given to dispute, how much to song. Remind me again how not to be a howl on a string. All right, I think I'll do one more here. There is a tradition in poetry readings that you announce when you're going to read your last poem. Sometimes people are kind and they say, I have 3 left or something like that. Possibly my favorite person ever to kind of give this closing is Ed Hirsch. Edward Hirsch would always say, can I do an Ed Hirsch? I have one last poem to read. The Iliad. I just want to steal that from him every single time. This is not the Iliad, this is called The Path. So many times, you're no paved road, not even a trail worn smooth by feet, just a smattering of breadcrumbs and birdseed scattered by wind and squirrels. Some mornings, it's hard to say how much of the sky is the sky, and how much of it is me looking at the sky. Isa says, I take deep breaths so that the world can have wind. My borders may not always match the borders of the world, but I try to blur my edges. And so you lead me on, you take me for a ride, you disappear altogether, and then you find my feet again, oh path.
Wonderful, and now is a good time to mention that all of these folks' books are available for sale in the main room out there by Phoenix Books, and I'm sure they'd be happy to sign books afterwards if you would like that. You can find the books of all of our authors and presenters today out there in that main space. Next up is Neil Shepard. Neil Shepard's 9th collection, The Book of Failures, came out in January 2024 from Madville Publishing. How It Is, Selected Poems, was published in 2018 by Salmon Poetry of Ireland, and in 2019, he edited Vermont Poets and Their Craft from Green Writers Press here in Vermont. His poems appear online at Poetry Daily, Verse Daily, and Poem a Day, as well as in several hundred literary magazines. He founded and edited for a quarter century the Green Mountains Review, and he currently edits the online literary magazine Plant Human Quarterly. These days, he splits his time between Vermont and New York City, where he teaches at Poets House.
Thanks, Erika, and it's wonderful to hear Alison Stevens' readings, and look forward to yours, Toussaint. I may steal Stevens' line and say I'm just going to read one poem. It's not the Iliad, but it is just a single poem called The Wasting, and Alison requested this one, so I'm going to oblige her. The poem is about my father's death and our contentious relationship in life, trying to come to terms with that. And there's not much else to say about it. I think it's all in the poem. There are 15 sections, and I will pause briefly between them. The Wasting. He was deep in coma. He was warm to my hand on his brow. Whatever furrows the world's concerns had plowed into his forehead were smoothed over now. A bed lamp shone overhead. Now he was inert as a sunlit stone, ready to merge again with the earth. His breathing, when it came, was even, no rasping or panting. Someone said his breaths were triggered not by the body's need for oxygen, but by the buildup of CO2 in the lungs, our waste needing to be released into the world. And so the exhale before the next inspiration. Someone said, your dad is taking in less from the world, no food, no water, and so less energy, less carbon merges with the body's oxygen, and less reason, therefore, to exhale. Wasting away, we say, wasting away when there is no waste left to promote the next breath. That was the stage I found him in, or on, playing his part in the final act. Someone had brushed his hair, had placed a breathing tube beneath his nose. 2 hospice workers entered and said, we're here to honor and to love your father. Had I misheard the second infinitive? They said it again, to honor and to love. And thus began all my woe, as they placed 2 pillows under his torso, gently turned him first one way, then another, to keep off the bed sores. Each time they rearranged his open mouth, which had crumbled from the pull of gravity, until it was again mostly a round O, exposing the speechless tone, the shadows in his throat. Speak. Tell me of the blood rush and the blockage. Tell me how the senses close. First the blackout of the eyes, then the body's lost bearings in the world, the tongue teeth-bitten as it tries to describe the whirling vertigo, the fire in the temples, the enormous ache that comes from nowhere you can name. Almost last, the scent of burnt fuses, smelling salts. Speak, you can hear me. The last to go are your ears. You can hear me saying nothing, struggling with that long suppression, feeling. What do I have to say to you? I plant my hand on his forehead. Caress it, I tell myself. I turn my hand over and with the knuckle side, caress his brow. Talk to him, I tell myself. No words come. Say nothing, especially now when it's dying, that is not true. Others would say otherwise. Give comfort at all costs. My creed, such as it is otherwise from their otherwise. I will say nothing or a few vague things. Well, here we are at the end. You look calm. I hope you're calm. I've flown through a storm to be here. Can you hear me? I'm here now, at the end, at your end, at the end. The doctor said, without food or water, a failing body lasts at most a week. A hospice worker whispered, I've known some to last for 2. Someone on the night shift swore the record was a month. A body lived without nutrition for a freaking month, he said. A freaking month. So much distance in my gaze, I'm ashamed. We've never been particularly close. That word, particularly, the culprit. He'll die by degrees, my voice said to my mind. My anger will leach, my love will come, or at least I'll arrive at a neutral place, as if perfect neutrality were peace. We sat another hour or 2. I checked his toes and fingers, not blue, not curling. The doctor came to check his heart, his breath, and feel his left leg. It's getting cold, he said. And that means it could be days or hours. Hours? It would be days, my voice said to my head. I brushed my knuckle over his warm brow. I listened for a minute to his 5 or 6 breaths. I smoothed his hair, and then I left. That woe those Oreos. Oreos stacked before him like Midas gold gleaming in his eyes. 2 piles, 5 high, ready for devouring. Just desserts for a day's work well done. We are carbon creatures. Our food's carbon, our acids breaking it down, extracting it from the body's deep mines for energy. So much did he consume. The waste, the want, the sugar, salt, and fat, the snacks, the snacking before meals, the snacking after, the snacking between TV ads, tubs of ice cream, bags of chips, candy bars, cashew nuts, cans of Coca-Cola. From dinner to bedtime, thousands of calories. How does a man on a couch elevate his respiration rate? How does a man inert burn off the consequences of his waste? That woe because I could not love him, because unlike those hospice workers who knew him not, who honored him only as generic man, because unlike them, I who had lived with him had so much unresolved, so much deep unacknowledged, whatever it is that tears the world apart, from him to me, from me to him, till death us do part. So God, I do have it. So help me God, I do have it. What was the ancient grudge between us? That you banished my world as I banished yours. If poets are the unacknowledged legislators, then legislate this. Traverse the no man's land between business and verse, between war and peace. Because you were a foot soldier of the Second War and I a war resistor, because you could recall all the war songs, yet balk at the poetry that shaped them, balk at that one word of surrender, poetry, province of the lily-livered, limp-wristed aesthetes. Now, near death, I will teach you its province and provenance. Start with that sound you tartly called your art form. It involves the mouth, as mine does, if not the mind. You did this thing with your lips pulled back, tongue pushing breath through your teeth, a quick whistle, a word you made up, onomatopoetic, sound from your cheeks, a sizzle, grimacing like a gargle, a sizzle, whistling an old war tune, Yankee Doodle. This is my art, you said. It rhymes with fart. That's your business, isn't it, big shot? Because unlike those hospice workers who knew him not, I had lived under his roof, had broken his bread, had owed him all, then nil, had played the prodigal, had not returned, or had returned, only embodied. Just spend time with him, Mother said. Just sit together and have a snack. Watch TV. I had struck tennis balls back and forth with him across the net, had struck golf balls together toward a distant green, had struck up one faltering conversation after another, because what I loved was nothing to him. Nothing. That TV show from which he quotes, Yabba Dabba Doo, that's Fred Flintstone, actor closest in looks and actions to my father. And he's a fucking cartoon character. Yabba Dabba Doo's not rocket science, not E equals MC squared, not cogito ergo sum. It's paralingual sound, that is, sound streaming alongside language without the smart referentiality. It's pragmatic, expressive, is an upraised club swung around a yawping caveman's head. Yabba dabba doo, which could mean I feel great, or go cook me a flaming brontosaurus steak and I'll feel even greater. It sounds like a noogie to the noggin, It sounds like a happy wedgie, like a victory lap after Flintstone's feet have raced the caveman car around the track. It sounds like Archie Bunker's Edith, or Ralph Cramden's One of These Days, Alice, pow, straight to the moon, but with less meaning and less aggression. It's an exultant sound, happy as a pig in shit, my father's other top 10 hit in the annals of analogs. And now he lies all other words or paralingual meaning, just the steady 6 breaths in an hour and a minute, each one heavy as a stone at the caveman quarry. A call from hospice, 2 a.m. The night nurse reports my father's done with sleep, with breath, the brief rituals of details, diuretics as his lungs filled with fluid, morphine as panic and terminal pain seized the body, and then he slipped away. Not the end, not the end. Just time for a drink. I said I wouldn't, damn it. No metaphors. But God, when the chapel director shows us a side door, we enter and see the body laid out in a cardboard box as we'd agreed. The body in its hospice gown as we had agreed. The body slightly bloodied at the breastbone from where they plucked the pacemaker. A slight shock, and more shocking, the body's face made up to look like, no, this simile, this counterfeit was not my doing. I who long ago despised the mortician's deceitful hand. This face, this old man's face, looks like a youthful father, facsimile of someone I'd known in boyhood when he lifted me skyward. But no, being in cold storage for 3 days, his face, when I touch it, is, as the dead metaphor goes, cold as stone. Rest in peace. Why is the acronym an antonym? RIP, R-I-P. Where he is, peace. Where I am, torn, broken piece of the world, and therefore shorn of peace. He's cremated, his body gone to ash, his wholeness delivered out of whole cloth to an urn. Ridiculous. Why purge and burn the corpse, if not to cast him broadside by a generous hand? Not one of us is so generous. My mother wants his ash, if not his essence, sealed in an urn, sealed in a mausoleum beside her own corruptible body. Did he wish some dollop of him had been scattered into mountain wind, or sea breeze, or gusts along a golf course? No one knows. His living will and testament are silent on the matter of scattering matter to the 4 winds or the windless tomb. What's the answer to the riddle of a man with no last wishes? To follow mindlessly. Rest in peace, Father. That faker in the cardboard box is not you, nor is that cheated ash and dust in the urn. Rest in peace. Our memories remain the only vessel worth mattering, worth holding your matter, Father. Conflicted, conflated, shrunk, or smooth as death on your brow, these memories are all we have of you now. They're ours until they pass with us, or pass out of our minds into timelessness. They are what we know as love for a father, a stranger who brought us here to matter and to the brink of matter. Rest in peace, Father. You have carried our terror farther than you would know, simply by being Father, carrying our fears a while in the world, carrying us out of many dark places, carrying us now to the edge where your own small matter expands into the gathering immensity. Now you're gone, and that mouth sizzle sounds in my head its untranslatable intimacy. It is sound beyond sense, though not senseless, echo of who you were. That sizzle and those round Oreos you once consumed are now consumed in my mouth after the memorial service, sweet chocolate and cream wafers linking time to timelessness. And the sound that swells triumphant from your throat long after your breath is stopped is yabba dabba doo, as meaningless as it is enduring. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. That was powerful. We do have one more reader, and then I'm going to invite our readers to come up here on the stage, if you will, and respond to questions, have a little conversation. So first, I would like to introduce Toussaint and Negritude, author of the collection of poems Mountain Spells, from Rootstock Publications that just came out, I believe, former Poet Laureate of Belfast, Maine, and 2024 nominee for the Poet Laureateship of Vermont, Afrofuturist poet, bass clarinetist, and composer Toussaint St. Negritude conjures whole liberations in full tempo. U.S. Poet Laureate Gwendolyn Brooks described his work as full of sweet sounds and surprises. Originally from San Francisco, Toussaint has lived and broadly thrived against the African diaspora, from the sacred mountains of Haiti to the Coltrane district of North Philadelphia. He, along with bassist Gaylord DeWald, is the leader of the band Jaguar Stereo, a free-form ensemble of his own poetry and improvisational jazz, and his works have been widely published and recorded for over 40 years. On an alpine sanctuary facing east, Toussaint St. Negritude continues to thrive in the farthest elevations of Vermont's Northeast Kingdom.
Thank you. It's something to actually mathematically be old enough to talk about having done something for 40 years. Thanks so much to the poets that read before me. It's such a treat to hear poetry. I personally find poetry and art in general, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
I find poetry to be a conjuring, like a lot of the arts, and definitely from my cultural background as both African American and gay, language has long been a medium of conjuring. And I heard that in all of your voices today. I often, when I hear language, especially in the form of poetry, it's almost like it tastes good, like it's savory, like you can, just the combination. Okay, enough of that. So the poem I'm gonna begin with from my book, Mountain Spells, speaking of conjuring. At some point I realized that being a poet, that we are conjurers and these are spells. So the first poem I'm going to read is called All These Dreams and Rivers Away. Waking up free, me and the ancient me who first broke free of slavery in 1619, me who followed the Powhatan River to the Appalachian peaks, me and the future me who just broke free of slavery in the year 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, me who followed the path of my own liberty, waking up free, me east of where the Wabadiwajo speaks, waking up free by the waters of Lake Willoughby, me astrospectively, seeing freedoms where freedoms ought to be, infinitely waking up free, waking up free, waking up free, all these dreams and rivers away from 400 years of slavery. Me and the present me, who will always be free of boundary, all these dreams and rivers away from 400 years of slavery, waking up free in the brook green forest, opening of my own truth green focused wilderness, spruce top evidence of an ebullient consciousness, here for the luminescence, here in the fugitive mountainery of letting go of everything but the blessings of a high ridge transcendence, feeling the inner passage of an astral vastness, waking up free, far beyond the madness, far beyond the sovereignty of ashes and the democracy of deceit, waking up free from the chattel bondage of compliance and somebody else's greed, waking up free, self-free, and released from the mordant hounds of those so determined to cease all peace. I'm here for the belief in the illuminating liberties of all the stars we seek, feeling beyond the periphery into worlds not even the most tidal of eyes can see. Waking up free, all these dreams waking up free, all these dreams and rivers away from slavery, taking the leap, feeling the means, waking up free to be seen by me. Free as jazz and the air I breathe. I wrote that right after the first few months of COVID. And I wrote that in a park just outside of Montpelier, Shady Rail. And I was celebrating what I thought maybe would be like the end of all this nonsense. I had friends who were in such mourning about the shutdown, mourning about the loss of what they were defining as normality. And I'm like, normal? Anyhow. So this next poem is kind of the preface for my book. I had, putting this together, I had imagined like a traditional preface written by the loneliest monk, or someone of that caliber who could best understand this book. And I decided just to submit a poem in the form of a preface. And it's a self-portrait poem called For All the World to See. And I just want to preface this a little bit. As an African-American, as a gay man, as an artist, So just as a being, my entire life, my parents' life, everything I know about my ancestry has really been centered on being out, being open for the world to see, for all the world to see, which most importantly is yourself, for you to be able to see yourself. So just a little background there. I know you all know that. So this is called For All the World to See. And here, my beloved Earth and cohabitants, we have the rare and luminous star-crested liberationist, a fine and mellowed creature of soul-sonic proportions. Though known for their glamorous plumage and flights of doubt-defying freedoms, the star-crested liberationist, more notably, is a creature of remarkable autonomy, iridescently shining, not for societal approval, but brilliantly by and for their own known emancipation. Consequently, it is through such lavish self-appreciation that the star-crusted liberationist is fabulously so adept at lighting and divining such unshackling skies for all the world to see. Okay, all right. I'm going to do just a couple more. Okay. Let's see. It is so nice to actually have a book to pull poems from instead of a stack of papers. Okay, this is another poem that was also written kind of at the start of COVID. I was looking on maps, trying to figure out, okay, the best route to like walk from like Plainfield across the Canadian border. What sort of backpack I'm going to carry, what I'm going to bring, you know, which CDs, which typewriter, all that was going on in my head. And so this is a poem called I'm Going with Harriet, referencing Harriet Tubman. I'm going with Harriet. I don't know how many of you are with me on this, or how you might want to do as you wish, but I would be totally remiss if I didn't say in all seriousness, I am not going back. Y'all can yearn and pine for status quo's return all you want, but I ain't going back. Send my regards to capitalist greed, the same irrational creed that has now left you to writhe and bleed. But I am not going back. I am not going back to that plantation that has dogged me to my knees. I am not going back to the treachery that has denied my most vital need to fabulously simply be me. I am not going back to your complicit country, 'tis of thee. The buck stops here. Y'all can return to death as you wish. I will stake my fortunes on the livelihood of mountains far from all this. The currency of my survival is as free as the stars from which I exist. The fruition of this garden blossoms to a higher time and bliss. Y'all can wait for what thrills your master's lash. But I ain't going back for none of this. Okay. All right. Okay. The last poem I'm going to do here is called Climbing Home. And I think the poem kind of tells itself, just an inspiration to those who are beating the odds of what you're told you can't do. Called Climbing Home. I have been climbing can't-dos all my life. I have scaled every doubt. This great land of the free has assailed my way. And I'm still here, scaling every can't-do this old world has to offer. Ain't a can't-do high nor lawful enough to keep me from climbing to what, to where, or what, or who I need to be. I have been climbing can't-dos. Can't do this, can't do that. I have been climbing can't-dos all my life, and I am still here, scaling my way to yonder be.
Oh, thank you, Toussaint, and thank you to all of your readers. I'd like to invite you to come up to the stage. We have a short question and answer before our next event. So first, does anyone have any questions they would like to pose to our poets before I dive in? Do you have any questions from the audience? Yes.
My general question is, do you remember the first poem you read that spoke to you? And you think, oh, there's something going on here that I want to know more about.
So just so everyone heard, the question was, do you remember the first poem that you read that spoke to you? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was in 7th grade and I read Stanley Kunitz's poem, The Round. Actually, I heard him read it on a television program, and it was the first poem I heard that just grabbed me, and I rushed out to get the book, memorized the poem, and tried to speak it like he did, you know, and it became part of my musculature. And but yeah, 7th grade, Stanley Kunitz's The Round, for sure.
Stephen was much more advanced than I didn't meet a poem until perhaps almost college, and it was Yeats's Lake Isle of Innisfree, and there was something in the rhythm of that poem that I loved, and I'm sure several of us out here can recite it together, but, you know, and then later I heard Yeats recite it in that great two-tone way of his. I will arise and go now, and go to Innisfree. And he says, it took a devil of a lot of trouble to get that into poetry, so I will not read it as prose. That was the first.
The first poem I read that made me want to, or believe that I could write poetry in a different way for myself, although I had written poetry by then, was, I remember I was in the library. I used to just go to the library as a teenager and pull books off the shelf, and it was Linda Paston's poem, What We Want, and that poem touched me in a way that just made me feel that I would want to write poetry all my life.
That's a good question. I think for me, it was a combination of Langston Hughes and like when I was in elementary school, which was like during the late 60s, combination of Langston Hughes and music, the poetry that I was hearing and lyrics. And I think the first poem that I memorized of Langston Hughes, and the last poem I memorized, was a poem of his can't remember the exact title, but it was like, my old mule has a grin on his face, been living so long he's forgot about his race. And, you know, somehow I connected with that as a child, not being old or, you know, just coming to some understanding of race. And to reflect back on that now that I am 33, a wee bit older, yeah, I was really attracted to metaphor, and like just metaphor in poetry and music, old sayings, you know, can't drag a mule to water for being stubborn and talking about someone that's stubborn. Like that.
Do you have another question from the audience? I have questions. Okay, great. So thank you all so much for the work that you read, and I love how it was so different but also sort of spoke in conversation with each other, as I think, and several of you touched upon personal loss as well as more collective loss and grief and trauma. And I'm wondering how this current world that we're living in has influenced the poems and the way that you think about loss, the way that it has informed your poetry and your practice.
The world we live in at the moment.
This current world, yes, this current crazy world, how has that sort of that universal experience influenced your personal work? It's a big question.
In 2 sentences.
Yeah.
Well, certainly in the Book of Failures, my book, I address a variety of failures, both familial but also social, and the last section is about the pandemic. So it addresses the kind of the loneliness of the pandemic, what one does when one has no audience, all on Zoom, if that. And there was a whole political section sort of noodling in my mind, that orange-haired dystopian, who I shall not name, but, you know, struggling with the politics of that as well. So the world, you know, always is flowing into, I'm sure, all of our work in ways that we both know and don't know, right? The known and the unknowns and the unknown unknowns. Who said that? Donald Rumsfeld?
We have just a few minutes left, if anyone had other thoughts on that.
I was just going to say, I feel like all the poetry is about connection, and you know, there's so much dissonance out there. I think it's a good way to, you know, get back in touch and try to make connections across, you know, to other people, to other, you know, ideas, things like that.
Yeah, I found poetry to be a good vehicle in terms of loss of loved ones, or even ones you didn't love. That poetry is a great kind of medium to kind of have those final words after loss.
And we do have to wrap up in a moment, but Alison, do you have any thoughts on that and how that has influenced your work?
I mean, I'm writing mostly about a pretty deep inner landscape in my writing, but I'm sure that there's some, you know, distress tones and undercurrents happening because it's such a, just the political climate. I can't help but be affected.
We want to thank these amazing readers for sharing their work with us today, and to thank you all for being here. As I said, they do have books for sale in the other room if you pass the desk and go that way. I'm sure they're willing to sign books and chat with you if you have other further questions. We do have an event coming here in just a few minutes. Is that the horror event? Yes. So we do have horror writers coming here in this space if you want to stick around. Then this evening there will be more poetry at Muddy Waters just down the street, starting at about 5:30 through 9 p.m. We will have Vermont Poet Laureate Bianca Stone reading, as well as a tribute to the late Reuben Jackson, whose posthumous collection just came out with Rootstock, and I believe Toussaint is going to be reading some of his work. There will also be readers from the Burlington Writers Workshop, the Poetry Society of Vermont, and Sundog Poetry. So if you want some more poetry, come on down this evening and share that with us. Thank you all so much.